Turning back the votes has been a catch cry for the coalition in the run-up to this federal election and remains one of its key policies.
Joining us now from Adelaide is the opposition immigration spokesman, Scott Morrison. Scott Morrison, good morning. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Virginia, as always.
You may have just seen that excerpt that we played there. Your party's candidate for Greenway, James Diaz, fell over yesterday while trying to explain your six-point plan to stop the boats. Now, I know that there's an opposition six-point plan for productivity. Can you name the 6 points, or was he getting the two policies confused?
Our policy, I think, on border protection is probably the best known right across the Australian community, Virginia, and that policy, as you know, involves turning back boats where it's safe to do so. It involves temporary protection visas. It involves rigorous offshore processing. We've made very clear our plan to ensure that those who come without documentation and have thrown that documentation away don't go in the queue at all, rather than going to the back of the queue. There is the regional cooperation that extends right across and up the chain, and of course we have the Operation Sovereign Borders arrangements, which brings together 15 different agencies to tackle this task on a daily basis as we go in to battle those people smugglers.
You might want to let James Diaz know that then at some point. So look, both the government and the opposition now have offshore processing, as you've mentioned, Pacific Island solutions, and are refusing to resettle asylum seekers here that come by boat. For the benefit of voters watching this morning, in your view then, what are the real differences between you and the government's policies, specifically on asylum seekers?
Well, there are several, and the first point I'd make is that the PNG arrangement that they've announced is actually not real, Virginia. They have no agreement with Papua New Guinea to ensure the resettlement of people in Papua New Guinea. They had a deadline for the 31st of July to have that MOU, at least for offshore processing, revised, and they missed that deadline. And now we have the absurd suggestion with the minister saying that the High Commissioner in Papua New Guinea may in fact even go to sign a memorandum of understanding in the caretaker period. Now, that would be unconscionable. I mean, this is an issue where it would bind future governments. It is a controversial issue, and the government, I think, would be way out of order here if they were having memorandums of understanding binding future governments executed during the course of the caretaker period. So they don't actually have a resettlement agreement in Papua New Guinea. We know their Nauru announcement, which they announced on the weekend, also fell over. So that's the problems with their offshore processing. It's not actually real. It's just a press conference and an announcement. Of course, turnbacks are a key point of difference, and that's been on the record for a long time. Temporary protection visas, that is also a key point of difference. I mean, if Kevin Rudd is re-elected, 30,000 people currently in Australia going through their processing, if they're successful, would get a permanent visa from Kevin Rudd. They won't get one from Tony Abbott and I, only temporary visas. And of course the coordination, which is the point I made before. I mean, one of the things you have to do in this area is getting everybody working together on the same problem and focusing ahead. Now, we have 15 different agencies that are working often at cross purposes with the best intentions, and we owe it to them to get better leadership across all of those organisations under a single point of command.
But Scott Morrison, the issues that you raise as a potential problem in relation to getting formal and solid and ongoing agreements with Papua New Guinea or with Nauru, they would equally affect any plan that you would then want to put in place as government as well.
But this is the difference, Virginia. What Kevin Rudd is saying, and he's spent millions of dollars of taxpayers' money saying this, is that everyone who arrives illegally by boat will be sent to Papua New Guinea and they would be resettled there and they would never be resettled in Australia. Now, that statement is just not true. It's just not real. He doesn't have such an agreement with Papua New Guinea. And to claim that he does, I think is a gross misleading of the Australian public. We're about to approach 50,000 people who have arrived illegally by boat. And the reason that has happened principally is Kevin Rudd's decision back in 2008. And now we have him on the eve of another election making a promise which he can't back up. And the PNG Prime Minister is making that clear. Even last night, yesterday, he was saying all of this can be reopened, and we weren't with Nauru that at the end of the day, they have a right of veto, as PNG would. So he's just making promises and claims that can't be backed with implementation.
Let me ask you what you might do should you win government. Would you close Manus Island in favour of Nauru?
No.
What's the maximum population that Nauru could handle, that you believe, that you could send asylum seekers there and could be there for an indefinite period?
Well, there's the capacity to keep scaling up. We've said that we can put an additional 2,000 straight away. That's in addition to what the government announced on the weekend. All the government announced on the weekend is relocating people after the riots. That's all that was. It was dressed up with signing ceremonies for something they should have been doing anyway to clean up their own mess.
So you're saying there's endless capacity in Nauru?
No, that's what you said, Virginia. That's not what I said.
So, but I'm asking, how many? If you say they're significant,
well,
how many could you have there?
Well, I'm answering your question. An additional 2,000 immediately. We know of another site where you can put another additional 2,000 on top of that. You've also got the issue of the post-assessment accommodation. Now, this is the critical issue in Nauru. You've got to be able to accommodate people after they've been found to be refugees for some years. And we've also got the site we've identified there down at the what's called the location site, which is a very run-down area which we would redevelop. And that would provide not only housing for those who are found to be refugees, but ultimately in the long run, it would be a very good housing project for the people of Nauru and leave a real legacy. So
and how many would that be then?
Needs right across. Well, at least 2,000 you can put on that site. And on top of that, you've also got the processing capacity of the rebuilt centre, which burnt down. And they're also, not as yet, but they should have done this ages ago, building a family facility for 600. So we think you have to do both. That's our position. The government says you've just got to do Manus Island, and that has a limit on it of 3,000. That's been made very clear by the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. And already we're seeing the great division that is occurring in Papua New Guinea about this arrangement that our Prime Minister has announced. So
Scott Morrison,
that has a long way to go, and I think there are very real political difficulties of implementing that arrangement in Manus Island.
Well, it sounds like there could be very real practical issues in trying to get done on Nauru what you want to get done as well.
Why do you say that?
You're talking there about 2, 4, potentially 5,000 on such a tiny island with a 17-kilometre ring road around it. You say you could effectively house people there, a place where there are significant law and order issues on Nauru already, and not cause any social dislocation or problems.
Well, there are not significant law and order issues. What do you base that on, Virginia? I mean, I was there last Monday. I've been there 4 occasions. I know the island pretty well, and I know all the members of Parliament, and I've met with them all over many occasions, and I know that they're very happy to see the processing centre continue, provided we get the right arrangements in place, and they trust the coalition to do that. I mean, we've been there many times. We've been working with them over a long period of time, and our policies have been thought through. They haven't just been dreamt up in a month after Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister. We've been there. I mean, Minister Burke has been there for 4 hours. I've been there on 4 separate occasions over 3 years. I've worked this detail through, Virginia, and I know the place very well, and I know it can be done. And
what's your attention then, should you win government, on the idea of a regional solution, given there are at least 100,000 asylum seekers in Malaysia trying to get out? They're the ones that we know of, at least, that are registered with UNHCR, probably more like 150,000. How do you persuade Malaysia to tighten up visa requirements to stop the influx of asylum seekers who can easily get a visa at the airport and use that as a place of transit?
Well, that is what Operation Sovereign Borders is all about. It is about in bringing in the regional elements of what we do in this space to integrate with what we're doing with the domestic policies.
But how do you persuade Malaysia? On that point of visas, how do you persuade Malaysia? Do you think you can?
Well, there has already been some movement, I understand, in that direction, and you would have seen the movement also in Indonesia. And those
I've seen the Indonesian one, but not what with Malaysia yet, no.
No, I'd seen some reports that there's some potential movement in Malaysia as well, and I would welcome that if that were to occur. But remember, it was the coalition that started the Bali process, and that Bali process of regional cooperation was principally focused on regional deterrence, and that's what the coalition would also focus on, whether it's trying to tighten up border and visa controls on entry into whether it's Malaysia or Indonesia. It's about improving and increasing the scale of our police operations in partnership, particularly with Indonesians, but also with Malaysia. That's what Operation Sovereign Borders is about. It's about connecting all of our activity, whether it's intelligence or police work or interception and disruption work up in the region, and even going further up the chain, back to Pakistan and Iran and Afghanistan. You've got to make all of this work together. And the Captain Emad saga showed that, the agencies were at cross purposes, and a people smuggler was able to sail in and fly out, and nobody seemed to know.
Scott Morrison, you've only ever been in opposition. Do you think that being in government and getting all this done, as you say it can be done, do you think it might be a bit harder than it looks from the shadow bench?
Well, I think it looks very difficult. I always have thought it's very difficult, Virginia. That's why I've spent years going on the ground, talking to people directly involved in the implementation of these things. I've been to Indonesia several times. I've been up into Malaysia. I've been over to Nauru and to Manus Island, to Papua New Guinea, all of these places to get on the ground and understand the practical issues involved in implementation. And that's why I can say to you with some confidence about the work we've done to ensure that we can hit the ground running. Now, I know this is a very big challenge, and I know we've given a very significant commitment to the Australian people. We haven't done it lightly, but we have done it because we know we can do it. And I think that's the sort of work that is required if you're going to be in the position, hopefully, Australian people willing, of being elected to government. You've got to have done your homework, and we certainly have on this issue, and we have the record.
Scott Morrison, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you for making time.
Thank you very much, Virginia.